A few years ago, there was a man. Some would say a visionary, some would say a true warrior, some would say a man with a childlike enthusiasm for the future. This man has fought for Ukraine, as he was known as the Ghost of Kiev. He's fought for the IDF. He's a true champion for all of us. Samuel Steen Heidenberg, a few years ago, gave a speech at the TED Talks where he laid out a plan for the future. He, of course, predicted that the world would end 5 years hence. He was wrong, but we can assume that everything else that he said was right, like we do with all of the other climate alarmists and such. And he laid out a plan for the future of 2070, a glorious future where the state would murder all old people and disable people to prevent them from being such a strain on the system, something that Canada, as we know, is already doing. And he also stated something really progressive and groundbreaking, which was that we would have state-enforced homosexuality. Now, this was something that he predicted would be in place by 2070, but I'm really glad to be able to tell you all that we're already there. 2024, so Sam, thank you for your work, but you were being a little bit slow on this, if dare I say conservative, in your thinking of how long it would take to get to state-enforced homosexuality. Because already in countries across the world, especially in the West, we're getting there. We're basically there. So Lauren Southern, earlier on, 2 days ago now, posted about new hate crime laws that are being implemented as of the 16th of February, so they're already in place in British Columbia, in Canada, will now make it illegal to try to talk anyone out of gender transitioning, labeling this as conversion therapy. They've also added a whole new slew of other hate crimes to curb anti-SOGI protests. I was wondering what SOGI was, and I looked into it. Well, in the area of British Columbia, in Canada, they have SOGI education.
Sexual orientation, gender identity. Right.
Yes. Where you can see here, this is the people giving guidelines to schools, which I would assume are being mandated by the government, where they're talking to students about homophobia and transphobia.
Oh, they've got the two-spirit in there as well. Do you remember where that came from, for anyone that doesn't remember?
Some bollocks, I'd imagine.
It was invented by Harry Hay in the 90s, but they've adopted it as if it's Native American or Native Canadian or whatever the hell they want to say it is.
Indigenous Canadians, I believe, is the politically
Harry.
correct term. And they talk about 62% of these students, who are definitely real, feel unsafe at school. And they have all of this educational resources. Here we can see the map of their current conquests. I assume this is where they're aiming to get to, hopefully before 2070, because we live in the glorious future. This is what all of our forefathers were fighting for. I know my ancestors were looking forward to this day. And I decided to look into the documents that she was sharing, where she got them from, because she posted them under here, and you can find them in our links down below. These are the Prosecution Service guidelines from British Columbia, their Crown Council policy manual that lays out a few things. So they codify within the legal guidelines ideas of intersectionality and of post-colonial, anti-colonial theories, and they just put it into these legal documents. So Canada's insane. Canada is an insane country. Canada is not run by evil genius Machiavellians, it seems to me. Maybe they are. Maybe there are some people who are evil and Machiavellian behind the scenes pulling the strings. But as far as I can tell from codifying all of this into law, obviously it's an assault on the founding stock Canadians. But also, these people are actually insane. Yeah, so let's take a look. They state here, hate is disproportionately experienced by marginalized communities. Yes, as a member of a marginalized community, yes, I do feel hate is being disproportionately experienced by me and people like me, because it seems that the entirety of every power structure across the West is saying F you whitey. So
specifically straight white men.
Thanks for that. But of course, marginalized communities should be capitalized because they're an official category of anyone who isn't white. And they say, especially by those with intersecting identities. So we've got those nice intersectional identities codified into law now, i.e. persons who have multiple attributes that may subject them to discrimination, including race, religion, and gender identity. Once again, I feel discriminated against constantly by my own government for all three of those things. Not that I feel like I have a gender identity. I obviously have a sex, which I conform to.
I, as a Christian, if I stand on the wrong street corner and give the wrong answer to whether or not I'm praying in my head, I will be arrested. So I feel a certain degree of religious persecution in this country, but no, it doesn't matter because I'm a straight white male and I'm not a Muslim, I suppose.
Advocating or promoting genocide is something that's illegal, so we should shut down the entire Canadian government, US government, British government, etc., etc. But of course, I can't say that because that's a conspiracy theory. And they talk about as well in here offensive related to conversion therapy. Now, the way that they're categorizing this is that conversion therapy is when you tell kids that actually you were born a boy and that means you are a boy. And just because you're 7 years old and your insane blue-haired teacher told you that you're a girl doesn't mean that you're a girl. That's conversion therapy now, as we know. Everything is redefined. Up is down, left is right, freedom is slavery, etc., etc. And they say here that what will be categorized as hate crimes are causing a person to undergo conversion therapy. Sorry, little Timmy, I won't be calling you Sally today. Removing a child from Canada with intent to cause them to undergo conversion therapy. So you're locked within your own borders.
So if you don't take your kid abroad to trans them there, it's illegal.
No, it's if they're being transed in Canada, you disagree with it, and you say maybe I should move to, I don't know, Florida or something. They'll go, sorry, they'll stop you at the border.
So that's interesting. So is this going to cause an international case of where a parent doesn't disclose the fact that they aren't trans affirming, take their kid abroad, go to somewhere like Florida, and Canada will demand an extradition if that kid resumes their birth sex?
Maybe that would be interesting. I'd like to see the Mexican standoff that occurs because of that. And they also say, of course, promoting or advertising conversion therapy. So even telling little Timmy that you might not be Sally, it will presumably be advertising. And it seems that the reason for all of this, from what I was seeing, because Lauren Southern posted a video about it, was that they wanted to shut all of this down because certain groups like Gays Against Groomers were putting banners over on the overpasses of Canadian highways, and they wanted to be able to shut that down and persecute those kinds of groups for putting up banners that said politically verboten slogans.
So Justin Trudeau, I'm pro-grooming, actually.
Yes, he is, in fact. They also go on at the bottom of this document to talk about colonialism. And once again, we get the anti-colonial, which is another word for anti-white, discussions, and we get all of this language here. And they say, once again, this is an illegal document, and it cites the victimization of Aboriginal people in Canada 2014 from the Statistics of Canada, saying the history of colonialism, displacement, and residential schools in Canada has translated into lower educational attainment. Of course, we're saying this because we say it, therefore it's true. You have to assume that because they have lower educational attainment, lower incomes, higher unemployment, higher rates of substance abuse and suicide, high levels of incarceration. In addition, rates of victimization of Indigenous persons, especially for Indigenous women and girls, no statement on who's doing that victimization, are significantly higher than for those non-Indigenous persons. So this is an article of faith that because they have worse outcomes, this is the Ibram X. Kendi idea of ethnic differences, which is the racism of the gaps argument.
Why are you showing me when you're talking about
Because
Kendi?
you're such a big fan.
Yeah.
You and Kendi go for brunch on Sundays.
Can I pick this apart slightly as well?
Yeah, go for it.
So are you aware of Professor Nigel Bigger from Oxford University, the fellow?
Yeah, I've got his book.
Yeah, so I spoke to him on Wednesday. His book's fantastic. Anyone who wants to learn more about colonialism, go and read it. He has a whole chapter on the Indigenous schools in Canada that were set up upon the request of the Indigenous because they wanted to learn English and assimilate into the economy. So the premise here is that you didn't sufficiently incorporate us enough, therefore we have fallen short, therefore there is a disparity, therefore you are racist towards us. And also, it's the noble savage myth of we were doing just fine and dandy until you showed up with your thing like standards. But this has resulted in lower educational attainment. Hang on a minute, you didn't even have the school structure before the schools were brought along. So you weren't even tracking educational attainment.
Exactly.
You weren't educated at all.
You can't have low educational attainment if you don't have education at all. Checkmate, white boy.
So this is all just grievance politics. It's historical revisionism, but it's written into Canadian law. So sorry, Canadians.
And we have this beautiful paragraph at the end laying out exactly how crimes against people who aren't white are just worse by the very nature of them, saying crimes against Indigenous persons, including hate crimes and Indigenous victims groups and communities, are underreported. Citation needed. I mean, you can't really cite that, though, can you? If they're underreported, you're going to need to, well, just assume.
Trust me, bro.
Well, there's more crimes than we're getting reported. How do you know that? Well, because they're not being reported. Fantastic. Circular logic.
Hi folks, sorry to interrupt the video, but I just want to direct your attention to the aesthetics range of merch that we have on the store. These are beautiful images that I think work really well as posters or mugs. So if you want to support us, going over to the merch store at shop.lotus.com is easily the best way other than signing up on the website.
Crown Counsel should ensure that their charge assessments and positions on resolution and sentencing reflect the gravity of the problem of violence and hatred against Indigenous persons in our society, particularly Indigenous women and girls, and the serious injustice they face. So this is a carve-out saying crimes against these people are automatically worse by virtue of being against these people.
So if you have a naughty meme on your phone, or you watch the 1950s Peter Pan film in public, you'll get a harsher sentence and probably a rapist because he's brown.
And of course, there's no mention of the burning down of Christian churches.
Hundreds of those
in Canada. Probably off of the back of this kind of rhetoric being bandied about, and the kind of rhetoric that you're talking about with these Indigenous schools that were set up, because people have been told over and over again, this was basically genocide against you. And of course, we know from historical precedent that in the face of genocide, any resistance is permitted. So they see themselves as morally permitted to do anything in response to this.
You did fantastic.
These people are essentially following the following narrative of history, that you separate social classes into oppressor and oppressed, and there can never be any kind of coexistence. One social class needs to destroy the other. That's how most people are viewing things nowadays, especially in the left. That's why they constantly talk about rights. The rights are only reserved for the protected classes. You mentioned the Christians and their churches being destroyed and vandalized. No one. Where's the social outrage about this? Where are the leftists who are talking about the right to freedom of religion there?
Yeah, it's the Franz Fanon idea of coloniality that he collaborated with on Sartre. I was just going to say, you did a fantastic segment last year with myself and Aidan Paladin that you presented the information that they did loads of ground imaging for all of these supposed Indigenous graves, and they found rocks. Not a single body has been found yet.
It turns out there are other things that can be under the ground other than bodies. It might just be sediment, it might be rubble, it might be rocks. What a surprise. But of course, this is not just specific to Canada. While Canada are going the most insane with it at the moment, and they're the ones that we have the most information about regarding some of the classic cases that they've had there of parents saying, actually, little Timmy, you're not Sally, and then getting arrested and having their children taken off of them. This also happens in America. One of the most high-profile stories I saw about this recently was this couple in Indiana, which is a Republican state with a Republican governor, from what I know. They are a Catholic couple saying that the local government took their trans son, I think he is a boy, but he's saying that he is a girl, took the trans son away from them because they refused to use his preferred pronouns. This is a pretty harrowing story. So
this is Mike Pence's state.
Oh, is it?
Senator Mike Pence.
Ah, interesting. Mary and Jeremy Cox, who are Catholic, were investigated by Indiana officials for refusing to affirm their child's transgender identity because they claimed it conflicted with their Christian beliefs. Republican state. Can the Republican establishment there not do something about this? No, apparently not. The couple's son reportedly told them that he identified as a girl in 2019. The Coxes refused to refer to the child with their preferred name and pronouns, citing their religious beliefs in immutable sex. The DCS received allegations that the child's physical and mental condition was endangered by her parents, who were not referring to her by her preferred pronouns. This is a boy. Reports of alleged verbal and emotional abuse over the teen's gender identity were filed, which, as with all teenagers, is probably the parents saying, no, you can't have that actually, and the child turning around and saying, you're basically murdering me right now. You might as well pick up a knife and stab me right now, as all teenagers do, because teenagers, and I don't know if the Indiana authorities know this, I don't know if any of them have children, they're probably staffed entirely by bloviating blue-haired whales. Children, teenagers especially, exaggerate things. They like to cause a scene and be drama queens. And so if you say no to them, they'll say, "You're basically killing me right now." And then they'll run away for a bit.
This is the state basically destroying the family, because when you have young people and they're forming their identity, and you cannot just affirm any single bit of their self-conception. Their self-conception has to do with how they view themselves. Obviously, it's highly fallible for every person. Okay, so just by the state intervening and saying that we are going to take your child from you because you're not affirming 100% of what your child says, is basically the road to tyranny. Not only does it destroy the family, but it shows a state that wants to constantly intervene and pose as a moral authority, and an infallible at that, and basically destroy society, because the family is a basic social unit.
Absolutely. And like you say, they are completely destroying this family, because in 2021, the officials investigated the couple and placed the child in a gender affirming home. So breaking up the family directly and putting the child in the custody of literally state approved carers.
Everyone that's involved in this that has taken this child away from their parents should be in prison.
I want to say also that family law in the US and several blue states is becoming increasingly harrowing, because, for instance, you have asylums that up until recently had to notify the parents if there was a child leaving and going to an asylum saying that I ran off my house. They had the obligation to notify the parents, because exactly what you say, because
themselves as sanctuary
what are the
states.
chances that the child has is just
Being
overreacting,
dramatic.
Or
is dramatic.
has even been
Now
led
they have
astray by
said the
someone
exact
else.
opposite, that they don't have to do this, because the presumption is a presumption of guilt when it comes to parents. There's no presumption of innocence. There's presumption of guilt. If you don't affirm your identity, the identity of your child, the self-conception, you're treated as a guilty person.
Absolutely. And once again, for Indiana officials, another favorite pastime of children and teenagers is lying. Children are not perfect, impeccable angels who are spotless in their behavior and manners. Children like to lie to get what they want. And in fact, by doing this, of course, the main victim here, as well as the parents, is this teenager who is being led down a road, being put into a situation where, like you say, finding his own identity, struggling with that, especially in today's atmosphere when these kids are being presented with so many varying options for things that are incredibly unhealthy for them. And then that is basically a cry for the parents to erect boundaries, to be able to put them right and give them correct morals and correct understanding of the world. Whereas the state is just playing into this fantasy idea that you can be whatever you want and you don't have to have any consequences.
So long as you support me politically,
which
you
is
can
going
be
to
anything
be
you want.
incredibly damaging for every child who suffers under this. And finishing off this article, upon completing the state investigation, Indiana Department of Child Services reportedly determined the allegations of abuse against Mary and Jeremy were unsubstantiated. So they looked into it and said, they're not abusive parents. All they've done is said no to this kid. But the state still argued the disagreement over gender identity was distressing to the child, so they don't get the kid back. The Court of Appeals has also upheld the removal, and it might be going to the Supreme Court now. So if this does end up going to the Supreme Court, I can only hope that, what's her name? Diversity Hire, that's her name.
Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yeah, that was it. She's going to get, 50 paragraphs of warbling, nonsensical non sequiturs, and Clarence is just
Clarence Thomas, she's going to adult human female.
yeah.
Yeah.
Clarence Thomas is just going to post.
The tragedy is she's also going to get around $1 million to write that BS.
Yes. Clown World. And on to the last bit here, just to really solidify state-enforced homosexuality is going way too far. I could take a little bit of state-enforced gayness, but this is ridiculous. This is something that I find completely sickening, completely inhuman. It's an NHS Trust, and it's only one NHS Trust right now, but it might carry on to the rest of them, saying that trans women's milk is as good as breast milk. This is a lie. This is a lie.
This is enabling a paedophile's fetish.
Yes. Yes, it is. In a letter to campaigners, the University of Sussex Hospital's NHS Trust, the USHT, said that the milk produced by trans women after taking a combination of drugs is comparable to that produced following the birth of a baby.
It's not.
No, it's not.
Women's bodies respond to the saliva of a baby to produce the antibodies in the milk that the baby needs. This is why breast milk is usually best for a child. Like, there's a 10-point IQ gap usually on average between breast milk and formula-fed kids. And you are not a woman. You are lactating clearly for sexual pleasure in the mouth of a baby. I think you should be in prison to anyone that does this.
I agree. The Hospital Trust, which runs Royal Sussex County Hospital, Worthing Hospital, and the Royal Alexandra Children's Hospital, among others, was also the first in Britain to use the term chest feeding in place of breastfeeding. So these guys are real pioneers. These guys are really pioneering that 2070 future, the paradigm shift that we're all experiencing right now. They pioneered that chest feeding term because it's considered by some to be more inclusive to paedophiles. Within its guidance were assertions about the ability of trans women to produce milk for a baby. These were the subject of a complaint last year by the Children of Transitioners, an organization founded by a woman whose father transitioned in an effort to produce advice for children in a similar situation. Because, of course, it's quite unusual and distressing for children to turn around one day and go, "Dad's mum now." When we talk about providing a stable environment for children and stable boundaries, that is doing the exact opposite. In an August 2023 response, the hospital defended its claims, referring to 5 scientific papers dating back to 1977, so cutting-edge research here, guys, and pointed to the World Health Organization, a neutral institution, their guidance and overwhelming evidence, quote, that human milk, not women's breast milk, but human milk, which sounds like a dirty euphemism, is better for a baby than formula milk. Well, we know that breast milk is, yes, but breast milk tends to only come from about 50% of the population. It also references a 2022 study that found that milk testosterone concentrations were under 1% with no observable side effects in the babies. Telegraph points out here that the study only lasted for 5 months and had no long-term data included in it. So that's great. A drug is required to lactate, this article continues, such as domperidone, which is often prescribed to women struggling to breastfeed and helps to stimulate the production of prolactin, a separate hormone that tells the body to produce milk. Domperidone is known by the brand name Motilum, which was not intended for this, but is prescribed off-label by doctors, despite the manufacturer, Janssen, itself recommending against it because of possible side effects to a baby's heart. And this is the more technical reason why you wouldn't want to do something like this, which is that it could cause trouble to the child. But of course, there are a number of other ethical, moral, and common sense, plain reasoning reasons that we've already gone over as to why this is wrong, and also that kick in the gut that you get when your disgust response really gets set off by something. I know with their non-existent brains, leftists don't really get a gut response telling them that something is disgusting, but to anybody who is a human being, you should look at this and say this is disgusting. But carrying on, the patient leaflet for Motilum says, small amounts have been detected in brain milk. Motilum may cause unwanted side effects affecting the heart in a breastfed baby. It should be used during breastfeeding only if your physician considers this clearly necessary. The USHT believes the practice is safe, adding that hospital staff advise any parent who is taking medication for whatever reason to seek advice on the possibility of that medication being transferred to the baby through breastfeeding, and also the health implications for your baby. So there's not really much else that I can add to that we haven't already. This whole thing is disgusting. And yeah, there you go.
If you appreciated that episode from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Brokenomics series, this episode on the Putin interview. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Twitter at lotuseaters_com on Twitter. Thank you and goodbye.